And Peter was like crying and screaming on the phone. I was like, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong? And his beautiful mum had been murdered.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and it's the big one today. You may have heard about it. Sarah Ingham is delving into the deepest, darkest areas of her person. She is, I know. It sounds exciting. And it's as bad as that, yep. So she's going to tell us a full life story up to now about her life, about her do's, her don'ts, her successes and her failures. It's so fun. So let's have a look, see what Sarah classes as success, I guess.
Chat. And I thought it would be good to chat about myself, not in a big-headed way, but just to, I guess, just open up to you guys and maybe tell you a few things about me that maybe you didn't know, and just talk about like where I came from and why I am the person I am today. Don't get me wrong, this is not going to be this big, extravagant, thrilling story. It's just little old me and basically where I came from, things I've been through, and basically just what's formed me into who I am today.
Well, I thought this was interesting to see exactly what's formed her into the person she is today, and I've come up with a little montage.
And you had no idea about the law on wearing a life vest when in a lock or on a paddleboard.
Hurry up with the tap. I am telling you now, we are probably one of the most grateful families that are on YouTube. My baby ain't stopping me doing nothing. Oh my gosh, they went to the Maldives during a pandemic. No, we didn't. They were lazy. So if you're thinking about giving us any hate, do one. Not so easy when these cretins are shouting them out in the corridor. Life's not about likes and how many likes you get on a blooming picture or how many clicks you get on your Instagram or YouTube videos.
Yep, Sarah Ingham and her 659 rants have formed her into the lovely Sarah Ingham that we know today.
I am going to try and include some things that I've never mentioned online before, so some new things that you would definitely, unless you know me or you're part of our family or close friendship group, you definitely would never have known. There's not much, but there is a few things. So, little old me was born in 1985 to my parents, and I was born on a council estate in Leeds called Seacroft. So some of you guys may have heard of that.
That's right, Seacroft, that's how she gets her nickname, Seacroft Sarah, for those that don't know.
Some of you guys may not have. And my whole family pretty much lived in or around the outskirts of Seacroft. I don't have a big family, especially now, but even growing up, it was never like a big old family. Even though our, when I turned 6 and my parents split, and I got a stepdad, even then, all these families combined, it still wasn't a huge family. But pretty much my family consisted of myself, my immediate family, and then my nana, which was like, she was everything. My nana and granddad were everything to me growing up. And we'll get more onto that in a little bit. But aside from them, I had my nana Eileen, which was my nana's mum, and she actually only died in 2012. She died in 2012, so I had her all of my childhood and teenage and early 20s years, which was so lucky, and she was such an amazing woman. And then I had an auntie and an uncle, and that was it, and three cousins, sorry. That was my family. And then on my dad's, that was from my mum's side, and then on my dad's side, I had my grandma and granddad, and my dad had a brother and a sister as well, but I very rarely saw my dad's brother and his children. I did see them at like Christmas and things. My dad's sister has 2 little boys as well. They're not little now, they're like big grown men. But that was it. That is literally my family. I apologise if I forgot anyone there, but that was pretty much my whole family. I was born in a flat type accommodation, and then we very quickly, when I was still a tiny baby, moved to a house. And we lived in that house until I was 2, and then when I was 2 we moved to another house that my sister still lives in today. So it's like my sister's home is my childhood home. It's the home I grew up with since I was 2.
Oh yes, Sarah, we have heard all the sob stories about how incredibly poor you were on the Seacroft estate in that house that you grew up in. Your sister still lives there and you moved on to higher planes and you have done so well for yourself, but your poor little sister has remained in that house for all eternity because she can't let it go because she just doesn't have as much ambition as you, apparently. But you did have a very tough upbringing in that house. It didn't have floorboards and it didn't have carpets on these floorboards and things like that. We've heard all the stories.
Now, some of you guys will probably already know that I've got I've got one sister and 2 brothers. So when this is mind-blowing.
Do you know what else is mind-blowing, Sarah? It's the fact that, you don't just have 2 brothers and 1 sister, isn't it? It's like you have 3 brothers and 2 sisters. I know, it's hard to believe that you could miss out 2 full siblings, but there we go, isn't it?
But I was 10 months old. I was 10 months old when my sister was born. What were my parents thinking? I'm so grateful to them now because me and my sister are super close. But yeah, there's only 10 months between us, so we have 2 months a year where we're the same age. And then I think it was 14 months after my sister was born, my brother was born. So 3 children very close in age.
And who knew that that brother would grow up to be a resident of one of the largest sex offender-only prisons in the UK, right? For sexual offences against minors. I know you forgot to mention that, Sarah, didn't you? One of the largest parts of your history as a family seems to have slipped your mind.
And then, yeah, we lived in our house, and unfortunately my parents split up when I was 6 years old. Obviously I was only 6 at the time, so I didn't know any different, and as an adult it was just something I never thought to ask my mum about. But my stepdad moved in pretty quickly, so I don't know what was going on there. But I do remember that my stepdad moved in quite quickly after my dad left. It's so bizarre, but I still remember to this day as a 6, 5 and 4-year-old sat in my mum's bedroom looking over the windowsill outside to the garden where my mum and dad were saying goodbye to each other, and me and my sister and brother were just crying our eyes out. We didn't really understand what was going on, but we knew something not nice was going on because my mum and dad were both crying and hugging each other. So I know it wasn't a nasty split, like just from my 6-year-old mind. And as I've grown up, I don't feel like it was a nasty, like, pack your bags and leave. I feel like there was still a lot of love between them. They were hugging and crying and saying goodbye, and then my dad left. And then my stepdad moved in. But long story short, they both went on to remarry. So my dad married his wife and had 2 children, a girl and a boy, and that's my half brother and sister. And my mum went on to remarry my stepdad. Ignore my singing. My stepdad. And they had a child together, my younger brother James, and he was born when I was 13, so there's a big age gap between them.
And this is the one that, well, when he became homeless, Sarah said, fuck off, basically. That's right, Sarah, the ever-loving big sister, she is... She didn't want to know when he was homeless. Anyway, what happened to the other sister? Your other half-sister? Any mention? No? Not relevant, is it?
They equally lived happily and had a happily marriage for 16 years. Equally, both of them had a happy marriage for 16 years. And then so bizarrely, in the same year, they both divorced from their spouses. They both divorced. And after 16 years, decided that actually they were meant to be together and they got back together. And my mum and dad got back together when, just after I had Esme, I think it was just after I had Esme, or not long after I had Esme, she was still a baby. And they lived happily for 5, 6, 7 years or something like that until my mum passed away of cancer. So that's my early upbringing, or like the tale of my mum and dad. Now, I left home when I was about 16. I think I was about 16, and I didn't have a falling out with my parents. There was never like a big thing that made me leave home. I was just so close to my nana and granddad. Like, they lived around the corner. As soon as school finished on a Friday, I was round at my nana's. From being 3 years old, probably younger, from as young as I can remember. The second school finished on a Friday, I was at my nana's door, knocking with my weekend bag. Hi Nana, she welcomed me, and I had my own bedroom there, and I just loved it. And I didn't go back home until Sunday at like 8 p.m. and it was bedtime because it was back to school on Monday. And I just loved it there. I loved that I had my own space and I didn't have to share a bedroom with my sister. It was just, I got all the attention when I was there. I was like my nana's first granddaughter. And I'm not gonna lie, I was spoiled. I was spoiled. I got loads of attention. I never wanted for anything. And I just was so, I could just remember being younger, just feeling so lucky to have such an amazing nana and granddad.
She does sound fabulous, this Nana, right? So it may come as a bit of a kick in the teeth to her then when your ever-lovely husband says this.
Different. You're limiting your own life experiences for a family member that you are not ultimately responsible for, right? It's not your child. You didn't bring them into the world. Your grandma's lived a good life, a long life. You don't need to sacrifice what could be your best years to stay and look after her.
Generally, as a family, we didn't have a lot growing up. I'm not going to go into like personal details of things, but we didn't have much growing up. But saying that, we didn't want for anything, and I never felt like I suffered growing up as a child. So we got spoiled on Christmas. At Christmas time, we always got a nice big pile of presents. I don't remember birthdays. I don't remember receiving any presents on birthdays. I'm not slating anyone for that. My parents absolutely not slating them for that. That's just the way they chose to do it. But I do remember on birthdays, it always felt special because the birthday child was always allowed to choose what meal we had for dinner, which always just felt like a really special treat. And I always used to choose a salad. I don't know why. And they used to do these beef burgers with melted cheese inside, and I just used to get so, I swear they were from a shop called Jack Fulton's. Does anyone remember that? But I just used to love it. I used to feel so special and lucky on my birthday because I got to choose dinner, and I always used to get the salad. And then we always used to get to stay up an hour later, so we always had to go to bed at 8 p.m. But on birthdays, let me go check Aurora. Okay, sorry guys, I just went to check if Chris was okay with Aurora because he's watching her and she's crying. But yeah,
Okay, Sarah, so why did you have to go and check on Aurora if your husband, her dad, was watching her? You know, trust him to watch him. To watch her, rather. Trust him to watch her. I'm sure he's not doing anything untoward. And for those that say on a constant basis that they worry when Chris is looking after the baby, don't, because that's quite sick, isn't it? There's no chance in hell that Chris is doing anything to that baby. I just wanted to address that because I've seen so many people say that. And there's no chance in hell, right? Because he messaged a 16-year-old girl, which is wrong, right? Doesn't mean to say that he's interested in little babies. It's a completely different thing. So, no, right? I don't know why the baby's crying. Maybe she doesn't like being changed. Maybe she doesn't like living in the Ingham family cult or whatever. I don't know.
What was I saying on birthdays? We got to stay up an hour later, so instead of going to bed at 8, we got to go to bed at 9, and it always felt really special, like getting that time. Even though my mum would just be sat there like watching EastEnders, it still felt really nice to just, you know, be up a bit later. And I can remember every single birthday. This is why I don't feel like we got presents on birthdays. Maybe we did get the odd thing here and there, but I remember on my birthday evenings, I was never like playing with toys during the extra hour. I was always colouring on my birthday cards. So, you know, like back in the day, birthday cards always used to be embossed. Like, it was so exciting when I got an embossed card, because I knew on the reverse side I'd get to like colour in, and I was always colouring in pen. So maybe we didn't have like felt tips, I'm not sure, but I was always colouring in. And I don't know, I always remember that. Those are my memories from my birthdays. Always choosing dinner and getting to stay up an extra hour later and colouring in my birthday cards. So when I turned 16, I left school and I moved in with my nana and my granddad, and I absolutely loved my life. I decided to stay on school at sixth form and do A-levels. I did A-level music, I did A-level dance and BTEC drama. I was never amazing academically. I never had the drive or the, I'm trying to think of the right way to put it. My parents didn't really care so much about academics.
Ah, so I see. That's where it's all come from, is it? Right? All this like lack of care and attention for your kids' education. It's come from your parents. Oh dear. So,
if, for example, I didn't want to do my homework, then, you know, my mum never checked up. She never checked. And as a teenager, I was like, yeah, you know, my parents are amazing. Like, she never checks if I have a thing. And I just, you know, Mum, will you sign my planner? Will you sign this here? And she'd sign it, not realising that maybe, you know, maybe not realising what she was signing.
Now, if I remember rightly, Sarah, you used to be the exact same when the kids went to school. When the girls went to school, you kind of missed things. In fact, one time you even forgot Isabel's parents' evening, didn't you? Didn't you do that? Yeah, that actually happened. And other things that have happened that you've vlogged about that makes you look very uninvolved.
So, like, I didn't often do my homework. My mum was never bothered whether I did my homework or I didn't. It was never asked about revision or exams or anything. It just was never taken seriously. Whereas in our house now, I'm always on the girls' back, like, you know, if they've got a test coming up or an assignment, like with Isabel, I'm always like, have you practiced? What have you done? I want to see what you've done. Let me test you on it. And I'm quite involved, whereas my parents were never, ever involved in my school. And that's the right word, involved. And so because they weren't involved, that meant that I didn't have to make any effort. I'm not gonna lie, that's what that meant. If I got detention, then my mum would just ring school and say, you know, she's not doing the detention because I lived an hour and a half away from my high school. And I had to get a bus, 2 buses to get to the high school. And that often meant in winter time I'd be getting home in pitch black dark, and I'd have to do a stopover on the bus in Leeds city centre. And as a 11, 12, 13-year-old girl, that was often quite scary. And that was my mum's reasoning on not letting me do detention. But as a teenager, I was like, haha, you know, quite ignorant, and maybe like, I don't have to do detention. I was never a naughty child at school, I'm not saying that. It was silly things like if I'd forgot my PE kit or I didn't do my homework. It was things like that. It was never because I was a rude or cheeky or naughty child at school. But yeah, I feel like I was just a bit ignorant at school is probably the right way to put it, and I didn't have that drive coming from home to do well. However, I loved, like Esme, dancing. I loved music. I loved writing music. I loved learning all about music and instruments and creating my own songs and singing. I loved drama. Like, I just grew up loving drama, doing plays and improvising and being in this lost world where everything just felt made up and different.
One thing I don't get though, Sarah, is that you loved all these things, right? Dancing, acting, making music and everything like that, right? But at no one point have we actually seen any evidence that you were any good at it or that you even enjoy that. I mean, we've seen a couple of TikToks that you've filmed where you've pretended to dance, and it just don't come across very well. I've never seen you singing or trying to sing or trying to put some musical notes together or anything of that nature that you claim that you did at school and you enjoyed and you're good at, right? I don't know, maybe having 6 kids has drum that out of you? Maybe having Chris as a husband has drummed that out of you. I don't know.
I loved it. So I did those in college. About halfway through my 2 years of college / sixth form, I met my first ever boyfriend. So I never had a boyfriend. Never had a boyfriend. And when I was about 17, I met Isabel's dad. So I met Isabel's dad when I was about 17. And I was shown a different way of life. I was shown a way of life that I didn't even know existed. I lived in this council estate bubble. And I was suddenly interested, and he was interested in me, this guy, this also 17, 18-year-old who drove around in a BMW and lived in a very rich area in Shadwell, in Leeds, in Alwoodley. I'd never even seen houses like this before. Like,
Sarah Ingham was driven on by the rich. Who would have thought it, right? Who would have thought it?
I was taken aback, and even though it was a very unhealthy relationship, I put up with a lot of things because I didn't want to go back to my old way of life.
So desperate were we for the high on life that you were prepared to put up with anything in order to keep it. That sounds very familiar, if I'm being honest with you. I mean, right now you're putting up with a lot from your husband, and you could have taken that away but lived a lesser life but a more fulfilling life. But no, you decided to stay with Chris because, you know, he can offer you at least a house with food on the table, I guess.
And I'm just going to interrupt my own self here and say that I am in no way or form like dissing any.
She was literally just about to say shitting on. She was in no way shit dissing. Classic Sarah. Can't take the Seacroft out of Sarah, right?
Anybody that lives on a council estate. I'm not saying you need to get out of this council estate. I'm not saying you can't be happy and loved and live a full content life on a council estate. All my family still live on council estates. All I'm saying is, personally for myself, I'd seen this new way of life and I wanted to keep it. I didn't want to go back. And that's just me personally. I knew what I wanted from life, and I knew I only wanted to move forward, not back. And I'm not saying that people in council estates are behind me. It's just the life I was living, in my opinion, wasn't moving in the direction I wanted my life to move in. So please don't be offended. Please don't take anything I'm saying literally. Please don't pick apart every single word I'm saying, because I'm only speaking of personal experience. So I wanted to move forward with my life. I'd had a taste of this new way of life, and it's what I wanted. And unfortunately for my own young self, I didn't realise at the time, like I said, this was my first boyfriend, to keep this new way of life, that then meant that I had to put up with anything in this relationship. And naively, I was stupid enough to do that. So I accepted anything in this relationship to keep the relationship. I look back on my younger self now and I just want to scream, what are you doing? Like, why? Like, don't be so stupid. You don't need this person in order to further your life. You know, you can do this on your own. You don't need. And I was naive. So I got with him when I was about 17, and I think our relationship was about 3.5 years long. We had Isabel when I was like 2 months before I turned 20, so almost 20 years old. And when Isabel was, I lived with his parents. He lived with his parents. I lived in a separate room. It's not like a back bedroom. That makes it sound like I was some sort of maid locked in a closet. It wasn't like that at all. But it was just like a small room that I had of my own in that house.
No, Sarah, don't dash Chris's dreams. He's got an eyes on some of these maids' quarters in Dubai at the moment. You know, these houses with maids, little rooms for maids to, that could be one of yours.
Which I was really grateful for. Had Isabel there, and we lived there for I wouldn't say happily, but we lived there for about, I think Isabella just turned 1. She just turned a year old. Sorry, Chris just came in. We lived there until Isabel was about 1. And just after she turned 1, an incident happened that I'm absolutely not going to go into on here. But nothing like severe, nothing like life-threatening. But an incident happened where I realised I could not be in that situation anymore with a young child. And I had to leave, basically, long story short. So I got myself a job at the local pub. It was called the Dexter. And when I got that job, I found myself. Like,
You know who else found yourself? It was Chris. In fact, wow. Okay, there's a little bit of discrepancy here. I thought Chris met you in that pub. But according to you, in a bit, that's not the case.
Realised who I was. I'd become a complete shell. I'd become a shell from 17 to almost 21. I was 20 years old, I was almost 21. So that's the time frame. So what? So yeah, Isabel was 1 year old. And I found myself again, and I saved every single cent I made from this job to get me and Isabel a home. I'm just going to throw in something that happened actually that nobody will know about, that happened whilst I was living there. I don't know why this has just suddenly come to me, but it has. And I don't know if I should even share it, but I think I'm going to, because this is something nobody will know. So, my stepdad had a mum, obviously, my nan, who obviously he was in my life for 16 years, so his family was my family, his sister was my auntie, his mum was my nan. In fact, his nan and stepdad took me on holiday to Turkey when I was about 8 years old. I think they were. I was about 8, and I went with his sister's daughter. So my cousin, she was called Natalie, she's a lovely person. Anyway, when I was pregnant with Isabel, I remember receiving a phone call from Peter, from my stepdad, who's called Peter, screaming down the phone, like crying, screaming, and I can't explain. He'd not told me what had happened, but I knew something terrible had happened in our family. I didn't know what. But I got this feeling like the whole world just stood still for like 2 seconds. And I got like this shiver up my back, my hairs were on end, and I felt like I was in danger. It's such a bizarre feeling. I jumped off the bed, I was at home, I worked at the prison in Wetherby, but I think I was on a day off or something, but I was still in bed because I suffered horrendous morning sickness. But I remember just jumping off the bed, I was in the house on my own, and running downstairs and opening the front door so that I could get out the house. But I don't know why I did that, but I did. And Peter was like crying and screaming on the phone. I was like, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong? And his beautiful mum had been murdered in the most horrific way. I'm not going to go into details about it because obviously family might watch this, and even though it's not like a dirty secret everyone's got to keep, it's not something that everyone wants refreshing, I guess, in their mind.
Well, Sarah, your exclusive unfortunately was not an actual exclusive, because your lovely sister Katrina revealed this 2 years ago nearly. 4 months pregnant with my first baby, sharing a bed with my 7-year-old brother. And this is her story, basically. She posted on TikTok, and it says, I woke from a nightmare. I was screaming. They've killed her. They've killed her. Shortly after, my brother woke crying his eyes out, saying, my granny just kissed me goodbye. Me thinking that's really weird, so I told our mum when we woke up about the dream. That morning I get my brother ready and take him to school, then me and my mum go to my nana's. 10 minutes after getting there, we get a phone call saying our nana had been murdered. She had been gone 3 days prior before her killer phoned the police. me knowing instantly that he killed her because of the dream I had. So as you can see, Katrina, Sarah's lovely sister, had posted about this nearly 2 years ago. We all knew about it, right? So we all thought at the time actually it was a bit weird that Sarah had never mentioned it. But how do you feel now, Sarah, that your exclusive had actually been leaked by your non-entity of a sister? She hasn't got a platform like yours. She could have monetized the shit out of that, you know. Did you not teach her anything? It was sad though, obviously. I'm not laughing about that. Fucking hell, seriously. Whatever happened there, absolutely horrific, I'm sure.
But she'd been murdered by her partner in a really horrific, terrible way. And nobody will know that about me. No one will know that I had an aunt that was murdered. And I just remember the feeling that I had that day. And even the circumstances around how she was found and how long that she'd been left were just utterly horrendous. Like I said, I won't go into details, but really horrendous. And I remember being pregnant at the time and just, I think I was about 3 months pregnant at the time. I can't remember exactly, but I think it was around March that this happened. It's 18 years. I can't remember, is it March or May, but I think it was March. And yeah, I remember just when we went like to her house, like to sort everything out, there was like newborn knitted cardigans that she'd started knitting, actually for my sister, not for me, because we were pregnant at the same time, but my sister was a bit ahead of me and she started knitting like baby cardigans for our babies because she was so excited. And it was just a really horrible, blooming horrible time. And then I remember when I was about 6 months pregnant going to court for the sentencing of the person that killed her, and he got 15 years. He was actually released a few years back, which is crazy, but that's probably something that nobody, because I never speak about it.
Yeah, but Sarah, this is where you're a little bit sort of self-centered a little bit, because you think that you're the only person in your family that is allowed to say anything about anything to do with your family. You know, as I said, Katrina's already blown that one for you a long time ago. I don't know if you follow what she does, but other people do, and yeah, sorry.
So that's probably something that no one ever will have heard. But she was a lovely woman, and I'm really lucky to have some really fond memories with her, going to the houses. They lived near a train station and we used to watch the trains, and going on that holiday in Turkey. And I remember she took me to a Turkish market and bought me a doll. I swear the doll used to cry and it smelled like cherries, and like when the dummy come out the doll's mouth it used to cry, but I just remember the smell. I can still smell the smell now. So I got a house when I was 20 with myself and Isabel, just before I turned 21. And it was such a liberating, like amazing feeling. It was still in Shadwell. It was still in the place that I wanted to be. And I just felt so lucky and so amazing that I had my baby girl and me and her lived together in this house that I'd saved so hard for. And it was just such an amazing feeling. Sorry, we moved in. I'm just been sat thinking. We moved in just after Isabel turned 1, so I think she was about 9 months old when I actually got the job, because I remember saving for like 3 or 4 months all of my wage. I was so lucky to be able to save all of my wage because her dad's parents fully supported me, so they fed me. They didn't charge me rent for me living there, I mean. They didn't charge me for like bills or anything, so I was really lucky in that aspect. So I was able to save up all of my wage.
So you mean to tell me that the horrible Isabel side of the family, who are just nothing but trouble, who you do not want seeing Isabel ever, and you've cut off from Isabel completely, they actually helped you get that flat that house. They didn't charge you rent. They allowed you to stay with your baby rent free in their home whilst you saved up for a place of your own. And yet now you've just dumped them, left them. They're not allowed to see their own granddaughter. Oof, awkward.
And obviously when Isabel turned 6 months, my maternity pay for my prison job that I had stopped. I had like a couple of months where I didn't earn anything, and then obviously when she was about 8 or 9 months old, that's when I got the job to pay for the house. So we moved in around October, so it was just after Isabel turned 1, and I remember shopping for our first Christmas tree that we've still got today. And it was such a monumental moment for us. I think I bought it for about £30 from Tesco. I remember, it's so weird how things just stick in your head, and this stuck in my head so much. And I remember going home, and I remember me and Isabel like having the Christmas music on in our own home where we felt safe, and just me and her against the world. And I remember putting the Christmas tree up, and it was just the best feeling ever. I did have to work a lot at the pub to support me and her, even though we did have support from her biological dad for a few months. He ended that after a few months, and I'll explain that why in a second. But for the first few months we were living there, he did pay half of the rent. So I think I still remember our rent. It was £375 for a 3-bedroom house in Shadwell or Woodley. You wouldn't even get a flat in Seacroft probably for that now, but we're talking 18 years ago. So I did work all hours at the pub all through the night. I worked all over Christmas. Just before Christmas, it was my 21st birthday, and I celebrated it in the pub. Like, they put me on like a little party, and I got my family over. And there was another incident that happened at my house that night that was not a nice incident with Isabel's biological dad. Isabel knows all of this. I'm not like letting out secrets here online. It's just I don't want to share everything. But Isabel knows like things. But
I've got to ask, right? Isabel knows things, right? She was 1, right? Am I right? She was just 1 year of age, and yet you've felt it necessary to tell her everything that her dad did to you when she was 1. Why? Can I ask why that's the case? Because I would say that it would be healthier if Isabel was kept a little bit out of the picture, you know, if she wasn't aware of what her dad was like, because that way she couldn't be swayed in any custody or anything like that. Isn't that right? And also... not that it was much of a secret anyway, because you started posting about it on your YouTube, didn't you? Because, oh yeah, Isabel's never gonna see this, is she? Anybody remember the good old famous black eye video? The one which she explicitly said, "This isn't about anyone in particular. Please don't speculate who this may be about." But she's only ever had two men in her life, so this had to be about Isabel's dad. But no, she was never going to put 2 and 2 together. You know, just a few short months after that, because before that, Isabel had actually been seeing her dad on a regular basis on visitations. But a few months later, that all stopped. I can't think why. You know. Another incident happened that night where the police had to get involved. And after that, I don't know, it's kind of like, it felt like a setback to me. Like, I felt like my bubble had been burst. Like, I'd felt like we'd moved on, and then we kind of got set back. And I remember sat, like, on my 21st birthday, just so upset when I got home from that. It was like after midnight when I got home from the Dexter pub. And just thinking, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do? How am I ever going to get out of this? Like, how can I move forward? And then, literally just after Christmas, like the first week in January, I was working in the pub still on a usual shift, dreading going back home to the house, not
with not because of Isabel or anything like that, obviously, but her dad used to be in the house and he'd have people around whilst I was out, and it just wasn't the best. It wasn't a healthy time for us to be around each other. And for us to be together, especially in front of Isabel, who was only a year old at this time. So I remember just being in the pub and like dreading my shift ending because I'd have to go back to the house, and I knew that he'd be there, and I didn't know who else would be in my house, and it was often females, not males. So it was just awkward and just not a nice time. And this group, and I had no friends, I have to point that out. I had zero friends. I hadn't had a friend since I was 17. I had nobody to talk to at all. And it's so weird, and I'm sure maybe somebody will relate to this, but I didn't feel like I could talk to my family, because if I did talk to my family, then they would not judge me, but they would, I don't know, I felt like they'd be angry at me for living in the situation that I lived in, and they'd be raging, and I worried about how my dad would react. I worried about how my dad was going to be if I explained things to him, and I worried about what effect that would have on me and Isabel if he was angry. And I don't mean like my dad would hurt me. I don't mean that at all. See, it's really difficult to explain things without deeply delving in, and I don't want to do that online. But I just didn't feel like I could talk to my parents, and I had no friends, nobody. I didn't have one single friend, except one person. I had one person who I met online, and the only reason I met her online, I'm not going to say names, because I don't speak to this person anymore. And I would never, I'm just not the person to slag somebody off. I would never do it. I don't have a bad word to say about this person.
Is this the person, the very, very good friend that you threatened to sue because
You thought that I'd just let this go. I see.
Is that the same friend, is it?
Online, publicly. But the only reason I became friends with her was because my ex tried to cheat on me with her, and as a decent person, she contacted me and let me know, and we struck up a friendship because I was desperate for a friend. I was like, I just want to be a friend, can we meet up? And we met up and we had a friendship. Anyway, I had no friends, and I forgot what the point was. Oh yeah, this group used to come into the Dexter pub of like these girls and boys. It was like a big fun group, and I remember always serving them at the bar and always having this deep gut jealous feeling like I wish I had that. Like I just wish I had a group of friends I could go out with and invite to my home. And
okay, so it was partly true what Chris was saying. They did meet in the pub, and but it was as part of a group of friends that they met in the pub, and it wasn't just Chris, the player he is going over. Oh yeah, hey up, hey up. you I can't even do it. Fucking hell, I'm not even try. I'm sorry, I'm gonna embarrass myself. I can't do it. No, I can't. Jesus. How embarrassing. Fucking hell. No, I'm not gonna do it.
something's just smashed. But just hung out with, and yeah, this group of friends came in. They were really nice. They spoke to me, and I hit up a friendship with a couple of the girls. It really bizarrely happened that I spoke to them a few times, and then this girl had trouble one night. She became stuck where she couldn't get home, and she'd fallen out with her parents and she had nowhere to go. I can't remember exactly what happened, but I said, you're always welcome to stay at my house. I've got a 3-bedroom house, and obviously I've got 1 bedroom, but I do have a spare. My daughter's in the other bedroom, but there's a spare. If you just want to sleep there, it's fine. And she took me up on the offer.
Okay, commendable, obviously, what you're doing there, but I feel like safety of your child is a little bit more important at probably this stage. So basically you met a stranger, a punter in the pub, right? You were not the landlady, but you were the barmaid, and they were the punter, and you said, come back to my house and live with me. Okay. Oh, dearie me. commendable. Possibly unsafe, but yeah, okay.
And we became inseparable. We became great friends. And Chris was part of that friendship group as well. And that's where that blossomed.
Oh, isn't that sweet? Chris was part of the friendship group and he just sort of weaseled his way in. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. The love story of the century, I think. I love it, I love it.
So me and Chris, this was all in the January, and then me and Chris officially got together in March. Who smashed something? So that is where me and Chris got together. We got together in the March. I remember it very clearly because I remember it was almost Easter time. And I used to throw a lot of, there weren't parties, obviously I had Isabel, so they weren't like nightclub type parties, but when Isabel went to her biological dad's, I'd invite this whole friendship group around. Do you know?
Why do you always refer to him as her biological dad? Why just don't say it her dad? Because it is her dad. I know there's obviously a lot of water under the bridge between you and him, and obviously now between him and Isabel, but still her dad. And it's really something you should have been trying to embrace at the end of the day, rather than just saying, yeah, that's your biological dad and Chris is your actual dad. Alright, that's what you've been pushing all this time. Now, I don't have any problem with Isabel calling Chris her dad, because that's the only dad she's really known. But it's just you continually saying, yeah, this is your biological dad. He is different, right? I just feel like it's a bit icky. I do.
What, right? Nothing can buy the way I felt at that time of my life. It makes me actually feel a bit emotional now when I think about it. Because nothing in life, aside from my family and my children and what I've got now, but nothing in life could ever come close to buying the happiness that I felt at that time in my life. I felt like I was on a cloud the whole time. Like I had everything I'd ever wanted. I had my baby girl who was happy and healthy. I was happy and healthy. I had this home that I was so proud of, and now I had a group of friends that all lived around me. Nothing will ever compare to the way I felt at that moment in my life.
Interesting. This group of friends, though, where are they now? I know people just sort of drift apart eventually, don't they? And I get that. People get their own families and things like that. But surely at least one of them might have stuck around, especially if they were originally Chris's friends. So it's not like he didn't like this friendship group that you had, because they were already his friends. So what happened to that then?
I was 21 years old. I finally had broken free from a very unhealthy relationship. I was happy and healthy, and I had my home that I was proud of and a baby girl, and I had a group of friends that I truly treasured. Like, really, I was so happy with. And on the weekend, and I was working all the time, I was constantly working all night, and then on my days off, when Isabel would be at her biological dad's, I was going out and I was having fun, and I was just living this normal life. It's just this normal life. I was going to the cinema, and we'd go to Nando's, and it was just an amazing feeling. And then I started up a relationship with Chris, and that was just so new and exciting. And I was like, felt completely out of my depth. Like, I genuinely believed with my first boyfriend, I had to stay. Like, I had to stay with him no matter what, because I was never gonna I felt unworthy of anything else. I felt unworthy, like, I'm never gonna get better than this. Like, look at this house that he lives in, and look at this car that he drives. Like, it was such a stupid way of thinking, but I felt unworthy of anything other than what I had with him, which was so wrong and unhealthy. And I just could not believe that in just a short year, my whole life had turned around, and not only did I have everything that I just mentioned I had, but I also had another guy who was I think Chris is a year older than me.
You think Chris was a year older than you? Do you realise that all throughout your relationship, he was exactly the same distance ahead of you age-wise. Like now, he's still a year older than you. 2 years ago, he was still a year older. You know, there wasn't like back then he was a year older.
But another guy that was the same age as me, who also lived in this nice area that I couldn't believe I could get a home in. He had a family that was just so wonderful and welcoming and loving, and he was interested in me. like he was interested in being with me. I just could not believe my luck. I've only ever had 2 boyfriends. I had a child with one, and I had 5 children with the other. I married him. And I just was on cloud 9. And I guess you could say the rest is history. The rest is history. Me and Chris very quickly became a couple. He moved in with me pretty much straight away. I don't mean I met him on a night out and he moved in the next day with a young child, with me having a young child. Obviously, we'd been good friends since January, and he'd spent a lot of time at my house. He'd spent a lot of time around Isabel already. She already knew who he was.
Okay, but you're talking like 3 months or something, isn't it? You said you met him in January as a friend, and you got with him, what, in March, and he moved in pretty quickly after that. So, what, 3 months? It's still not a long time, really, especially when you have a child to consider.
And yeah, he moved in with me in about April. He just slept over one night and never left. And then...
Okay, sounds legit, of course. Chris basically moving himself in. There's so many red flags from Chris when he was that age to how he is now. It's just all very, like, calculated, I'd say.
And that's going to go back to the rent. So Isabel's biological dad paid until I got with Chris. And the second that he knew that I was dating someone else, we were only dating at this time, straight away in the March, he stopped all payment. He was like, it's not my responsibility to be paying yours and his rent. If he's staying there, he should be paying. And so that's when me and Chris were like, oh, what we're gonna do, you know? Hi, I'm glad you're interested in me, but you now need to take on the rent for this house and my daughter because I can't really do it on my own. So it was quite intense straight away with me and Chris. Usually, you know, well, I don't have to explain what would usually happen. It was quite intense. He had to take on Isabel, but not only Isabel, but he had to also help financially supporting us if he was to be with us. And thankfully, he was fully on board with that. I'm not saying it wasn't a little rocky to begin with. And when I say rocky, I don't mean like there was any bad feeling between us, but there was a lot of stress and worry at the time, because the house that I was in was due for renewal and the landlord wasn't happy to renew with just me, and it was really awkward. Like, it was just a really awkward time. But in the end, Chris's parents actually helped us get a new house. We moved to Horsforth. It was a flat. We moved to Horsforth. We lived in this flat for about a year, and then I got pregnant with Esme. And the landlord was like, this house is not big enough. I have a new house on New Roadside in Horsforth, and it's actually a terraced house. It's got 2 bedrooms and a garden. The flat also had 2 bedrooms, but it's got 2 bedrooms and a garden. You should move here. And then we moved to that. Esme was born in that house in Horsforth, New Roadside. And then quite quickly afterwards, Chris wanted to move again. You guys know what Chris is like. And he found a detached home in Bradford. It was kind of just on the border of Leeds and Bradford, in a place just near Apley Bridge and Rawdon, so really on the border of Leeds and Bradford, but technically Bradford. And it was a detached house. We moved there. I got pregnant with Isla in that house, and she was born in that house. And then not long after Isla was born, you know, Chris got bored of that house and he wanted to move. It's always been Chris initiating moves. I'm always happy with what I've got. I came from nothing. I didn't care. As long as we had a roof over our heads, I didn't care. Chris has always been one to strive for more.
So what I'm hearing here is that Chris wanted to move, so you moved. Chris then wanted to move again, so you moved again. Chris wanted to move again, so you moved again. Chris wanted to move to Dubai, so you moved to Dubai. Chris wanted to go to Arctic, so you went to Arctic. Chris wanted to buy a caravan, so you bought a caravan. He wanted to buy a van, DPT van, and you bought that. You wanted to do this, you did that. And yeah, it's always Chris, isn't it? I'm not hearing anything from like what you want to do, Sarah. What do you want to do? Just if you wanted to stay in wherever it was you were, you had every right to do that too. But you didn't, because Chris.
I think we've got a good balance between us both. I'm always just happy with what I've got. I literally don't care. And Chris is always striving for more, and so we kind of even each other out. And so Chris wanted to move again, and he found our 3-bedroom house just round the corner, and it was over, no, I'm saying 3, yeah, it was 3-bedroom, but it was over 3 floors. It was a bigger house, and so we moved there, and that's where our vlogging journey began. So this was in 2016. I think we moved into that house in about 2014. And Isla was like a little 2-year-old, and yeah, it was just crazy. And then we moved into that house, and that's where vlogging started. And I guess you guys know the rest. Wow, that ended up being really easy to talk about and really blooming long. This is going to be about 40. Chris is going to kill me. He's like, don't do it too long. I'm like, yeah, it's going to be really quick. It's just a quick story of my life. It'll be quick. So, sorry, babe. But did anyone find that interesting, or did you all click off half an hour ago? You're probably going to get no views on this, and I bet the views are like a minute long. But to anybody that did make it to the end of this video, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you've learned maybe something new about me, where I came from. It's funny because people use this saying as an insult. I can't exactly remember how the insult goes, but it's used as an insult. It's been said to me many times as an insult. You can take the girl out of Seacroft. Seacroft's the council estate I grew up on. You can take the girl out of Seacroft, but you can't take Seacroft out of the girl. So it's basically saying I live as a commoner in a nice area. That's basically what that saying's about. Like me, you can take a girl out of Seacroft, so you can remove me from the council estate, but you can't take the council estate out of me. Why would I want to? That's absolutely true. You can't take my past out of me. That's never been an insult to me. I would never want to be any different. I would never change my past.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, Sarah, because if we have a little look back about what you said, you know, a good half an hour or so ago, what was it you said?
I was taken aback, and even though it was a very unhealthy relationship, I put up with a lot of things because I didn't want to go back to my old way of life.
So living in Seacroft was so bad that you had to put up with what you say is an abusive relationship.
My past is what made me who I am today, and there's no shame whatsoever in trying to better yourself.
And when you say strive for a better way of life, you mean find some poor rich bloke who will take you on, is it? Attach yourself to them?
Different way of life. I was shown a way of life that I didn't even know existed. I lived in this council estate bubble, and I was suddenly interested, and he was interested in me. This guy, this also 17, 18-year-old who drove around in a BMW and lived in a very rich area in Shadwell, in Leeds, in Alwoodley. Even if you came from a council estate, there's no shame in that whatsoever. So for anyone that thinks of using that to me as an insult in the future, don't. There's no point. It's not an insult to me. You are absolutely right. You will never take Seacroft or my early life out of me. It was a very unhealthy relationship. I put up with a lot of things because I didn't want to go back to my old way of life. And I would never want you to take that out of me, and I would never want to lose that.
So the funny thing here is that although she's saying that she'd never want to lose that, and you don't want to be taking the Seacroft out to Sarah, right? But she's admitted that the only 2 people she's ever been with has been people who have more than her, who've been from an upper market area, right? You know, both of them, in fact, even Chris.
I will always remember where I came from, where I grew up, how I came from a deprived family who didn't have the healthiest household growing up, or didn't see things that children should see. But that's not how I raised my children. I knew that I didn't want that for my children growing up. And I turned it around, and I've given them, I hate saying things like this because I know what comments it's gonna stir up from trolls, but I give them an amazing life. I don't care what trolls say. I don't care what your opinion is on what we do for a job, or I don't care if your opinion's that we live as a cult or anything like that. I know that's not true. And so I know that these things I'm saying are going to stir up comments like that in the thing, but don't bother, because I'll just block you. Don't bother. I'll just block you. But yeah, I turn things around, and I give my children the best life I can possibly give them. We're all doing our best. Am I a perfect parent? Absolutely blooming not. Have I failed many times? Yes, I have. Am I trying to learn from mistakes I might have made? Yeah, of course I am. I'm not saying I'm a perfect parent who's doing better than anybody that lives on a council estate, because there are some boss council estate parents. There's nothing wrong with anything I've said. I don't want anything I've said to make anyone think I'm saying anything bad about council estates, because I'm not. I just know that I've got to be very careful with how I say things, because people do twist things online. They do take things out of context. They do pick on single words and be like, you said this. And so please don't be offended by anything I've said in this video. I'm gonna round it up now. I just feel like I don't want anybody to think that I would ever forget where I came from, because I never will. I'm so grateful and lucky with what I've got, and I feel like as a child I didn't even dream that things could be this good for me. You know, like when people say that was only a dream for me, this wasn't even a dream. Like, this wasn't even something that would enter my head, to have this life that I've got. And I don't care what anyone's opinion is and what anyone says. I've worked hard to be where I am today. I've worked for it. That's not taking away anyone else's job, or how tired anyone else is, or how hard anyone else works. I've worked for what I've got, and I'm so happy and so content with my life, and happy with how things turned out for me. And I just feel so grateful for everything that I've got. So there you go. That's me. That's my life. This is where I came from, and I hope you all enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all back here next week with another video.
So yeah, that was fabulous. That was Sarah Ingham and her ever lovely, well, her family. It deserves its very own TV show, this, or even a book, right? So get writing. In fact, you could get Isabel to write you this book, and you could sell it. But yeah, quite interesting points here, most of which we already knew, and some of you might not have known. So it was quite interesting for you to catch up on that. So until next time, please give this video a massive thumbs up, comment all of your thoughts about it down below, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Until next time, take care. And bye-bye.